difficult it is to follow that act. Good songs are very, get me all going before I get up to here. I have to start keeping me one of those expeditions. Thank you for blessings and thank you this morning. Definitely appreciate everyone being with us this morning. This last week, had a lot of interesting things happen. You ever have one of those weeks where you find out all the stuff that you don't really want to find out? Like, taxes are due, your return's going to be 6 weeks late, your wife has a gallbladder that hasn't come out. All the things that we face in our daily lives, and it's sometimes very easy for us to forget the very root of our faith. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And I'd like if you would turn with me to the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John, chapter 19. And we're just going to start with one simple little verse this morning, but it's probably one of the most pivotal verses that you've ever seen. Now, many of you already know, 19th chapter of John is about Jesus sent to die on the cross. Shortly before this, he's betrayed. Then Peter has his little altercation. People come to take him. Jesus heals the one who Peter slices and tells them to not do this. This was the doing of God, and that it's now his time. Now, the first thing I want to point out before we even read the scripture is something very important. Above all else in Jesus' life, he was conformant to the will of his Father, even unto the death. And that's important. One of my favorite verses says that we're to be obedient unto death, even to death of the cross. He was obedient unto death, even to death of the cross. When you think about why it says that, it could have just been short enough to say that he was obedient unto death. That would be good, right? But to say even the death of the cross means even a bad man's death, a sinner's death, a murderer's death. He was not obedient just to give his life, but to give it in such a manner that the people he was saving deserved to be in, not he himself. So this was very important to God to mention that. So turn with me, John chapter 19, and we're going to read verse 30. And this, of course, is about the death of Jesus as he's on the cross. And in verse 30, he says this: When Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, It is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. Jesus died. And some people would think that the iconic 3 last words that he spoke on this in this particular juncture of his life were very, very simple, but they held such a powerful impact and sometimes overlooked at. That's what I want to share with you today. And there's 3 things we're going to talk about today that were finished. He said it is finished. What was finished? The first thing is that all the prophecies of the Bible, the Old Testament, connected with him, all the revelation of his coming, all the waiting of the Jews, all the fullness of the world and the hope of humanity had come to pass, and it lay right there on that cross. And when he said that it is finished, that blood had been spilled, that sacrifice had been made, the law had been satisfied, and now you can pass from death to life simply because of him finishing the work. How many times do we start something today that we don't finish? And it's just a human error. See, we all have it. I'm the world's worst about it. I'll get 35 things going and finish one of them every 2 years, whether I like it or not. And it's just horrible. It makes me feel bad that I'm not better at following through with things. But likewise, we all have that tendency as human beings that sometimes you heard the expression, you got too many irons on the fire? That's how the world is today. We got too many irons on the fire. We've got too many things to be concerned with, so much so that sometimes we forget to be concerned with just the simplest thing in our life, our faith, our commitment to God, commitment to our country, our love of our family. The simplest things mean the most to us and mean the most to God. And yet we complicate our lives and put all kinds of things in there so that when it comes down to it, and this is one of the best illustrations I ever heard from a Southern Baptist preacher I heard one time, and he said this, said, if at the judgment seat, the only thing you can do is tell Jesus all these wonderful things you did, and he asks you what you accomplished, and you can say nothing really important. What was your life for? You didn't finish anything. Not anything of importance. Likewise, with Jesus' commitment to go to the cross for us, we know the pain that he bore. Just the night before, crying tears of blood. The man was distraught about what he had to do. I love it when I hear people say, oh, Jesus just happy, luckily skipped right along to the cross. That is not what happened. He was God in Likewise, he knew the pain, the agony of everything that we had to live under. You think about this for a second. God is not conformed to time or to spatial recognition or to space or any principle which we live under, gravity, anything. Yet when it says that he became, the Word became flesh, and what it's literally saying is he chose to live under the same constraints as you do so that he could provide salvation for you. That's pretty important. Now you think about this for a second. If you were some sort of deity floating off in space somewhere, would you find these insignificant mortals who you created who can't listen to you for 5 seconds important enough to completely give up your deity and go and live as a meager, meek human being like them so that you can save them? It brings a new meaning to what it means for Jesus to be there on that cross. And when he says, "It is finished," this is the most powerful thing that is said in the Bible, in my opinion, because it means it all came together. And right there, as the blood flowed down that old rugged cross, everybody changed. Human history changed. And finally, that long-awaited Messiah had come to fruition. The sacrifice was made. The veil was rent. The Holy of Holies had received its sacrifice. One of my favorite things, unfortunately, that happens with human condition, I don't mean favorite like, haha, it's funny. I mean, it's just, we know that we have a repetitive nature. Humans have a tendency. Why do we teach kids history? So they won't repeat it. Yet it seems that we're doomed to repeat it even when we do know history. But here's the thing. Just like back then, the Jews, the people of his time, the religious leaders, had one thing that was very detrimental to them. They had waited for all these years for this Messiah to come. We talked about it a little bit this morning over in Daniel chapter 2 with the prophecy about the statue and what it's talking about, what it means, the interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. This is not the only time that Daniel interprets something for Nebuchadnezzar. Several other times, the son of Nebuchadnezzar, Belteshazzar, and what he tells him is the writing on the wall, that death surely awaits you. Swift destruction is coming for you. But also, this is a great gospel message. The very same thing is true. Death awaits every man. And what you're doing after that is completely up to you. But you have to first believe that on that cross, it was finished. So back then, they have this term called traditionalism, or we call it legalism, and their tradition intermingled with the Word of God, and they were then unwilling to accept Jesus as who he was because they were looking for someone else. Now, I want you to follow me here for just a second on something important. Did anywhere in the Bible, in the Old Testament, about prophecies about Jesus' first coming, not second, did any of them refer to him as a king, or a priestly attire, or who's going to walk around in golden streets and completely change the universe when he comes down? No, but it does say he'll be a suffering servant. It does talk about a lamb being led to the slaughter. It does talk about the rose of Sharon. It does talk about the first begotten of the dead. It does talk about the sacrifice of blood. Wait a minute. This isn't starting to sound like the people they had become waiting for. You see, that's the same thing we do. If we're not careful, our culture has enculturated us so much that modernism creeps into the gospel. And now, we see the same thing. We're not looking for the Jesus that's in the Bible. We're looking for the one that's in our head. And if we look for the one that's in our head and not the one that's in the Bible, you're going to be the one that's taken as a thief in the night, as he uses the phrase. You won't see the day of his coming. Now, I've always wondered something. I think it's interesting. I'm just going to share it with you for a second. Can you imagine what the excuses are going to be all around the world when the church is raptured? I just can't wait to see the headlines the week after. I mean, I'm not going to see them, but if I were going to be here still to see them, like Elvis comes home, takes church with him. I mean, I don't know what it's going to be. That sounds funny to you and I, but that's the truth of the way the world thinks. Got it figured out, but they don't really know nothing. Being very smart, they've become very base. And we've mixed now modernism or postmodernism with the Bible. So we take the things that we like, we dissect them. God's love, charity, grace, peace, happiness, contentment, love for all your brothers, which are definitely part of the relationship we have with God. But they leave out all the other stuff: death, condemnation, hell, swear, bad, demon, devil, all the things that possibly have a negative connotation. So what you're left with is an image of God being this nice little guy that sits up there and plays a harp and loves you. And it's just going to balance the scales at the end of the day. And if one side tips better than the other, you're going where you want to go. But that's not what the same God over here said. We forget something else. Remember over in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 4, and you can turn there if you like. I'm just going to share with you one part of the verse, and the famous line Peter says there. He's talking about the Jews. Because remember now, they're not looking for this Jesus that came. They're looking for some Jesus that's not yet come. They still are thinking that he's not yet come. And the question that they ask is, where's the promise of his coming? They missed it. They weren't paying attention. They were looking for the wrong things. Every interaction that Jesus had with them was over what? Their religion, comma, falsely so-called. Why? They wanted to be powerful. They wanted to have self-righteousness. They wanted to be involved. And when you express those things as a human, they look on the outside like good things. Oh, that guy is godly. Look at him. You remember in the gospel where it talks about the priest and them walking up and down the streets making long faces as though they had fasted, making for a pretense, making supplications and pretending like they were they were really holy. They're putting on a show. When will we wake up and realize that's what the world does? When you put a little bit of good intentions with a little bit of world and mix that with Bible, what you get is hell. You can't get away from it. So they were looking for a Jesus that didn't exist, and doing that, they missed what was going on. Secondly, his sufferings were over. When he had finally proclaimed that it is finished, it was done. The suffering was over for him. Now, we, again, sometimes don't attribute much thought to what really goes on here. We think, oh, well, Jesus suffered on the cross, that's so sad, now, I'm forgiven, I'm good to go, that's everything. But here's the reality of the situation. Jesus lived in the shadow of his cross all the days of his life. He may have been a man in the flesh. He was God. He knew darn good well what was going to be required of him. He knew what was coming. You remember a few weeks ago we talked about it at the age of 12. He's teaching the doctors and scribes in the temple. But yet you can see that there are certain times in his life where he knows it's coming. One of the most prominent examples, and we call it the first miracle. Now, I love the Bible and I believe it. I'm going to tell you something. Water into wine, I don't know if that was a good thing. Just kidding. But, he tells his mother something. Now, of course, she doesn't listen. Because we love our mothers, but they don't listen, right? She tells his servants to do whatever it is he tells them to do. But he tells her, it is not yet, my time has not yet come. What do you think he was referring to? The fact that he was about to turn water into wine? Or the fact that it is not yet time, not quite yet time, for the descension of man to fall upon the Son of Man and for his blood to be spilled? He says something similar to that effect.